No one likes to think about or even talk about the fact that we are all going to die. But if you own a home here in the Los Angeles area and your home is not in a trust and you die, your loved ones are not going to be able to do anything with that property for at least a year or maybe up to 2 years until it goes through the probate process. Now, you might say, I have a will and testament, so I'm protected. But I hate to break it to you. If you have a will, you're still going to have to go through the probate process. The only way to get around this is to get a trust. That is why I am so excited to talk to a really great estate planning attorney here in the Los Angeles area. She's going to tell us everything you need to know about trusts and wills and planning your estate so you can save your money, save your properties from going into probate. Probate is a very expensive and long process. So if you want to avoid all of that, watch the rest of this video because there's some great information that you need to know about your home here in the Los Angeles area. Lioness Ebbay, I'm so excited to chat with you about estate planning here in Los Angeles area. Welcome and thank you so much for interviewing with me today.
Well, thank you for giving me this opportunity to really talk about the importance of estate planning and as it pertains to the community.
Yeah, there's so many questions I have. I have a whole laundry list of questions I want to talk to you about because I think this is something that homeowners in Los Angeles don't really think about too much, but I think it's so critical and really important for their family's future. So I'm really excited for you to explain a lot of things about estate planning that I don't know or that people don't know here in Los Angeles. And you can give us like the nitty gritty of what you need to do, what you need to avoid. And I can't wait to chat with you.
Absolutely. The funny thing is, I was actually just at my doctor's office and he asked me what I did for a living. And I told him, I'm an estate planning attorney. He said, "Oh, I need to do my living trust." And I said, "I'm sure you do because 75% of the population in general does not have an estate plan in place." So
It's kind of
they're
shocking
everywhere.
to me, especially in California when home prices are so high. Like people's assets are very valuable here in California. So like why wouldn't you protect that for your family? It shocks me.
I'll tell you what, and you sort of you hit it. You hit it. We're here in Los Angeles County where some of the most expensive real estate is located. I think the average homeowner here in LA County, our homes are like what? An average of 750,000 dollars.
Now it's like 950.
I believe that.
Yeah.
I believe that. And so it's so important. But the thing is that a lot of people just don't know. They don't know that
Right.
they're holding on to their largest asset that they will probably ever own, and they don't know how to protect it. And education is that missing link when it comes to estate planning and being a real estate owner.
Yep, I totally agree. That's why I'm super excited to talk with you. All right, so let me jump in here. Um, okay, the first question I have is what is probate and why is it important for Los Angeles homeowners to avoid probate court?
Oh man. Okay, so we're gonna start with the ugly first, right?
Yeah, let's get
Um,
right into the ugly because that's probably the biggest thing that you deal with, right? Is avoiding probate.
yes. So you're right. The My mission in life is to help families avoid probate court. And probate court becomes significant when a person passes away with significant assets like real estate or even financial accounts that are over $184,000. If you die with these types of assets and they are in your individual name, and you have no estate plan, no living trust in place, guess what? You're sending your loved ones on a one-way ticket to probate court. And the sad fact is that when you are in probate, you're spending at least 2 years in the court system just to
Is it
try to get control
is it
of this.
2 years now?
Look, COVID messed up a whole lot for us,
Wow.
and I know you can relate to that.
Yeah.
Before COVID, the average was like a year and a half. Now it's extended because of this, because of COVID, and a lot of people just didn't think this virus was going to affect the population the way it did. What happened during COVID is that probate court got inundated with a lot of families that just did not have these estate plans in place. And so, you know, you never want to be in probate court. You never want to be in probate court for so many reasons. Family wealth is lost in probate court. You have to wait a couple of years to take control of your estate, your loved one's estate, and oftentimes the family home, right, that is now an average of $900,000 here in LA County, it gets sold. It gets sold, and it's definitely a way to kill a family's dream of intergenerational wealth. Right? We all dream about that, right? Leaving a legacy and what that means for our families. And if your family is headed to probate court, it's just bad news after that.
You just said that the property can get sold in probate court. So this, I assume that you're talking about if someone dies without a will, so intestate, right? So if they die without a will, the state of California actually gets to decide how those assets are distributed. Is that correct?
Actually, so let's back up. You could have a will in place. You could have a will in place, but the problem is that if you have a will and you own real estate, uh, the will is not efficient enough for you to pass that real estate. If you've got real estate, if you've got ownership in anything, whether it's you're an investor in an apartment complex or you own your single family residence or your condo, the only way to avoid probate court is to transfer that via a living trust.
Okay,
So,
say that again. So
yeah,
a will alone will not protect your real estate assets here in Los Angeles, correct?
it will do nothing for you but send your family to probate. A will is not enough. If you are a homeowner or you've got interest in an LLC that owns, a multiple unit apartment complex or even, a triplex, a will not help you. You need a living trust to pass on that real estate.
See, most people just assume that if you have a will, you're protected. But I mean, it's just
You're
not the
right.
case. It's so
You're right.
crazy.
Look, I blame it on Hollywood. I blame it on the movies that have these amazing, dramatic will readings. Someone dies, and then you got the great uncle who's yelling, I deserve this. And they're just fighting. And it's a will reading, but that's not real life because most people who are homeowners or have sizable assets, they need to have a living trust reading. But the movies don't do that for us, right? All we know about is a will. All our grandparents know about is a will, but it's just not enough.
Okay, so my next question is if somebody dies and they own property and they actually were smart and they went to you and they have a living trust, what happens? Like, how does that avoid probate?
Okay. So what happens when you put a living trust in place is that you put certain assets in that living trust, assets that are sizable, like your real estate, right? And once your real estate is transferred into your living trust via a quitclaim deed, your real estate is now being controlled by this living trust, right? And of course, in reality, a living trust is a paper document. It's a contract that you have with your beneficiaries, and it's letting the whole world know that if something were to happen to you, this is where your house is going, or this is where your apartment complex is going, right? And it's really simple because once something happens to you, you pass away, you transition, your successor trustees come to your estate planning attorney. If that's me, then they come to me and we start the process for administering your estate. And it's so, so simple. It's so much more hassle free than applying for a court date at the courthouse, which is about 6 months out from whenever, you start the application. It's so much more hassle free than waiting at least 2 years to do anything with that real estate. Instead, with a living trust in place, we do a trust administration. We file the appropriate administrative paperwork with the LA County Recorder and the assessor's office, and the property is transferred to your beneficiaries without any court involvement.
Wow. So I know that probate fees too are very, very expensive, right? Isn't it like 26? The cap is like $26,000 a year or something?
No. So here's the problem with the probate court process. I wish that attorneys were allowed to set our fees because I would charge $1 million for having to go through that system. But instead, attorney's fees are set by California laws, and it's sort of like a little like percentage off the estate. And it's, don't quote me on this, but it's something like, 3% off the first 100,000 and then 1% off the next 200,000.
Eesh.
I'm gonna give you an example. I have a probate matter right now, and it's a financial account, and it's like less than $200,000 that, my client had left in a retirement account with no beneficiaries. So who are we to know who it's supposed to go to, right? And the probate fees for that are about under $8,000. That's for something less than $200,000.
Wow. A lot.
So imagine it just goes upwards when we're talking about real estate, which is the biggest thing that we end up owning during our lives, right? But yeah, probate is bad news. It's costly. You end up losing up to 25% or more of the value of your estate. You have to pay.
25% is a crazy number.
And that's if we're not dealing with crazy creditors, right?
Oh,
That's just if we're trying to like let go of a house. But what if the decedent left behind bills and obligations? Yes.
so, so basically, if you set up your living trust, you avoid the fees of probate, you avoid the time of probate, and then if somebody dies, then it immediately passes to you without having to go through the hoops and the court dates and the fees and all of that thing that probate will takes from the estate.
Yeah. So I want you all to think about probate like this. It's like not being able to do what you want to do unless you have the judge saying it's okay to do that. And that's bananas because
Yeah.
I've got couples that end up going through probate because, title was only under the husband's name.
Mm.
Now the husband dies, there was no trust in place, and the wife is in court trying to get her house, and the judge is basically like, you can't have the house, you can't refinance, you can't sell until I tell you it's okay. And that
I
could
mean,
take 2 years.
what if somebody is in like financial dire straits and they need the money or the equity from the house in order to do that? They would have to wait 2 years in order to recoup that money.
I hear, yes, yes. I just ended a probate last year where the seller was just eager to sell because a buyer was lined up. We ended up losing a buyer because we couldn't close in time.
Yeah.
And the house, I mean, and this was a fast probate. And when I say fast, I'm talking about one home, one beneficiary, no family drama. It took about a year and a half.
Jeez.
And it was like us like really being on it, but that was a lot of stress for like no money. Because like I said, if I was going to go through probate for house, I would charge $1 million. But it was bananas. It was bananas.
So my next question is, let's say you own a home here in Los Angeles area and you have a mortgage on it. Can you still put the house in a trust if you have a mortgage?
Okay, like that is a situation that I run into so often. People have this misconception that if I have an existing mortgage for my home, that I don't really own it. So what's the point of protecting it, right? So let's think about it this way. If you do not pay your mortgage for a couple of months, who do you think the bank is going to come after?
You,
They're
of
going to
course.
come after you because you are on title. You're on title, you're on file with the assessors for property tax payments. And so, regardless of whether your home is entirely paid off or if you still have a mortgage, that's me, right? You are still considered the homeowner. And that means that if you are the homeowner, you've got to put your real estate into a living trust in order to avoid probate.
That totally makes a lot of sense. Of course, you're the homeowner, so they're going to come after you. What about this scenario, though? Let's say you have a home that you own free and clear, and the parents want to add their children to the property title. Wouldn't that be the same thing as like a living trust?
Okay. Oh, Philippe. So I get that scenario a lot when people just don't want to think about putting an estate plan together, right? And I get it. It's hard to think about a time when you may be too sick or too ill to make your own decisions. It's hard to think about a time when you're not going to be here with your loved ones, right? And so people tend to default and say, well, I'm just not going to do a living trust. I'm just going to put my kids on title with me now. Well, here's the problem with that. We had Proposition 19 pass a couple of years ago, and that really changed the game for how kids inherit real estate from their parents, right? What Prop 19 said is that if you inherit real estate from your parents or grandparents, you need to be able to say that in that real estate, you are actually primarily living there. That real estate is your primary residence.
Mm.
Because if you can't say that, right? If you can't say I lived in mom and dad's home and that was my primary residence at the time of their passing, if you can't say that, then there would be a property tax reassessment
Oof.
at current fair market value at the time of your parents' passing. So the problem then when people become hesitant to engage in their own estate plan and they just put their kids on title, the problem with that is if you've got three kids and they're grown and they're living their lives and they have their own primary residence, but you're putting three kids on title with you right now, that means you are triggering a 75% tax reassessment of your property at current fair market value rate.
Wow.
That's a lot. That's a lot, right?
So
And
it would, so just to clarify, so that would be 75% of the current value. So let's say they've owned it for 30 years, they've paid it off. Their tax, property taxes are like minimal. So it
yeah,
would skyrocket those property
it
taxes
would
because
skyrocket.
the kids are not the primary residents.
No. And the problem is once you push that button, you can't undo it.
Mm.
You can't tell the assessors I made a mistake, right? Because you can't undo that. That mistake you cannot undo. Um, Instead, they can transfer, your kids can transfer their shares back to you, but you will not be taking your property tax bill down.
Oh.
It's staying where it is.
So if
Because,
you're in a living trust, then you avoid that property re-triggering of the assessment.
well, it depends. It depends. There are ways around it, but you have a better option of avoiding that real property tax assessment if you do it that way. And it's just that plan, that avenue of just let me put my kids on title now. It's so problematic on so many levels because let's think about this. Even if you just had one child and you're like, I'm going to put my son on title with me right now. We'll be joint tenants. It's okay. I can handle, the 50% property tax reassessment because it's just me and him. Let's think about now you want to downsize, right? Now you're thinking, 4 bedrooms is feeling like a lot to me in Malibu. Let me think about Texas where I get more bang for my buck, right? So you go to your son and you say, okay, I want to move. I think it would be a great idea to sell this house. I need you to, be on the same page with me. Let's sell this real estate. Your son could say no. Your son could say, no, we're not selling the house, right? Because what happens when you put your children on title now while you're alive? You are giving them rights.
Yeah, because
You are,
if they don't want to sell and they don't sign the documents,
it's
you're
not
not selling
happening.
that house.
Exactly. Your son could say, you know what? This Malibu property, it's never going to come around again. We need to keep this in the family. It has happened, Philippe. It has happened. I've seen it where
Sure.
parents have to take their kids to court to force them to sell. What? And that's just bananas to me. Why would you give anybody power over your real estate? This is your real estate. You've worked for it, right?
So
So
if you have a living trust, you can still dictate anything that happens while you're alive, correct?
yes. So the beauty about a living trust in that scenario is that you still own your property, right? It's still you. You own your real estate. You're just telling the recorders, I'm changing how I own it, and I'm owning it in the form of my living trust. Another thing is, you still retain power over your assets. You are the manager. You get to spend your money, you get to refinance, you get to sell your home whenever you want. And so you've not lost the power. You've not lost control over your assets. And the beauty about it is, if something were to happen to you, you know that your loved ones are not ending up in probate. You know where your house is going to. It's either going to your son or your grandbabies or whoever it is, you are in control.
That makes a lot of sense. And I never thought of it from a rights perspective. Like if you add your kid, they have the right to say, no, I'm not signing this.
Oh no. The beauty about estate planning is that it is a really personalized area of the law. I get to, learn about my clients and their family dynamics. So it's a really colorful scene at any given meeting, right? But the problem is we also deal with family drama. And
Sure.
that's that's some of it. Power and control is really big in estate planning. And for you to be able to tell your mother, you know what? Buying real estate in Texas is not very sound right now. We're going to keep the Malibu house. That's a game changer. That's a game changer.
Yeah. And I'm sure that happens a lot when you're dealing with this type of money, this amount of money. Like people get crazy when like they start seeing dollar signs. They're like, nope, I'm not going to do this, even though it's not your house, it's your
Yeah.
parents' house, whatever it is. And in
Yeah.
terms of like the living trust, you can assign anybody as your beneficiary. It doesn't have to be immediate family, right? So let's say you have like a childhood friend that you love tremendously and you want to give them the house, like you can make them the beneficiary, right?
I've seen clients make provisions for their dogs. Like, no, and I'm a dog person, so I get it. I've seen they make provisions for their fur babies, like, you know, Candy has to be able to get her spa days, and it's
I
so
love that.
cute. It's so cute. I've seen clients make provisions for their neighbors because at the end of their lives, maybe they've lost their husband and they had no children. And so now their neighbors are the only ones who are checking in on them, making sure they're eating, making sure the caregivers are there. I've seen clients give to charities, and
Mm,
that's amazing. And so it's that's also a wonderful aspect of my job, is just seeing how giving and kind people can be during their lifetimes, and what happens when you do a good deed, what happens when you act like a real human being, right?
yeah. I mean, that must be the fun part of that.
It's fun, it's interesting. Yeah, it's fun and it's interesting. But on the same token, I've seen people disinherit their kids,
Oof.
right? And I would never encourage a parent to do that because, of course, I'm always thinking about the future and how do we prevent family drama from ruining a smooth and successful trust administration, right? But I mean, I've got parents out there who are telling me, um, I basically spoiled my child since infancy. She's 50 and I'm still paying her mortgage
Wow.
and her nursing student loans and her lawyering student loans. So, I'm not going to provide for her, but I will provide for her children, right? So I've seen clients do that. And if it sounds like reasonable to me, great. But if it's something like I never liked my third child because she just always loved the color blue and we just never got along, I would have to have a come to Jesus talk, like, okay, so this is what happens when people pass away. There's a lot of grief, and grief affects us differently, so let's think about this a little bit more, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's very complicated, and no one wants to think about their death. They're like, I'm gonna live forever, and they just like push it away, but it's going to happen for everyone. Like, no, no one gets to escape that. So, when do you start planning for something that you know is going to happen in your lifetime? Like, why
Well,
not plan now?
you know what? That's a great question. And I love to tell everybody this question. I love to tell everybody this in particular. Um, Part of what brings me fulfillment in what I do is that I can walk into any room, Philippe, any room, and it doesn't matter. I could be at the doctor's office, I could be at a mixer, right, at LA City Club, and I can tell you that every single person in that room needs my services. And they don't necessarily have to work with me, but they definitely need to know somebody like me because everybody needs an estate plan.
Yep, for
Everybody.
sure.
It doesn't matter what you own. It really doesn't. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you own. It matters that you are alive, breathing, thinking, absorbing these words because a lot of people fail to see the importance of power of attorneys, right? When I step into a room and I start talking about estate planning, everybody automatically just assumes I'm going to talk about dying and death. But that's not all of estate planning. It's a teensy part of it, right? Um, a lot of people are living into their 90s and it takes a while to get to your 90s, right? Most of us, we don't die like that. A lot of us, we grow older, we experience a decline in health. Some of us get dementia or some other, cognitive disorder. And at that point, when you have Alzheimer's, when you're diagnosed, your ability, your capacity to make decisions becomes very, very questionable, right? And it's obvious when you're talking to someone with a cognitive disorder and they're not necessarily looking at you or answering your questions, or they're asking you the same question 5 times in a row. Um, People forget about the importance of power of attorneys. Why? Because we get sick. We get diagnosed with the big C, right? During COVID, for some reason, I had a lot of clients dying from cancer and not COVID.
Mm.
So, we've got a lot of things like that, illness, incapacity, whether it's just a short stint, right, at a rehab center because you were in a bad car accident and you made it out alive, thank God. But people need to put power of attorneys in place. And that comes before dying, right? Power of attorneys are for people who are still legally alive, but not necessarily capable of making decisions, telling the doctor, no, I don't want that treatment, telling the nurse, I want to donate my organs. So that's such an overlooked part of estate planning. And so when you ask me, when should we start thinking about this? When should we start doing this? The answer is always yesterday. It should have been done yesterday because unfortunately, I'm that girl that people call at the 11th hour, right? Oh, we just got diagnosed with stage 4, or oh, I'm in the rehab center and I can't leave and I need these power of attorneys now. And that's great. That's great that I can make it there to help these families, but there's a lot of families that I can't help, that I have to say, I'm so sorry, but we've hit the point of no return. Because again, thinking about estate planning, thinking about your power of attorneys and putting your living trusts in place and all of that, that's always something that should have happened yesterday.
Yeah, because as soon as you like, just like insurance, like as soon as you need it, you can't get it, right?
Exactly, exactly. And you never, it's not a good place to be, where it's like, oh, we've hit the end of the road. Because I'll tell you what, this is the craziest thing I've seen. So when you don't have power of attorneys in place, you end up going to court again, to get control over whoever it is that needs a power of attorney.
I
And
mean,
it's
what
called,
happens? What happens if the court system is super backed up and like how long does it take to get it?
it is what it is. It is
Wow.
what it is. Yeah. So people don't know about conservatorships. Conservatorships are what happens when there are no power of attorneys in place. Conservatorships. And it's still a court process. I think it's like 20,000, at least 20,000. It just depends on what attorney you're dealing with. So conservatorships, the state does not set your fees. The attorney does.
Wow.
The attorney says, I want this much money. And I've seen spouses, I've seen wives go through a conservatorship for their husband because why? Mr. Smith has dementia, did not get power of attorneys in place while he was in great health. And now Mrs. Smith needs to go to the bank, pay bills, sign legal documents, and she can't do that because there are no power of attorneys in place.
So it's not just trusts. It's also power of attorneys. What other items in estate planning do you do for people? I assume wills as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, an estate plan, you're right, Philippe. An estate plan is many moving parts, many, because we have to think about the stages in a person's life. We have to make room for illness, we have to make room for incapacity, and then, of course, we have to make room for death, right? So, typically, the main components of an estate plan is the living trust. You want to put a will in place anyways, just in case, right? I call it the catch-all because what if you put a trust in place, but you never tell your attorney about the other financial accounts that you acquire along the way,
Mhm.
right? You want the right property agreements in place. And the power of attorneys are so crucial. There are two kinds. There's a property power of attorney, and that really helps with real estate, financial accounts, other financial assets, signing legal documents. And then there's the healthcare power of attorney. There's what do you want to happen in a medical setting with regard to your treatment? If you can't tell us, right? Do you want to prolong your life? Do you want to be resuscitated? Do you want to donate your organs? You want to do this ahead of time. You want to do this when you're in great health because if you don't have it in place, you've got a social worker making these personal decisions for you. And you've got a husband or you've got a spouse or you've got children that can do this, but you just didn't think about ever getting to this place,
Well,
right?
I know for me personally, like I do not want to live, you know, hooked up to machines, incapacitated, mentally. Like I would rather not continue my life if I was going to be hooked up to machines for the rest of my life until I died naturally. Like pull the plug, but if I don't tell you that and I don't have that written in documents outlining what my wish is, then somebody else gets to choose that for me, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a very personal experience for me.
Of
My
course.
own mother-in-law was in the hospital during COVID, and for 3 days, we could not find her healthcare power of attorney. We were
Oof.
looking through her condo up and down in the storage, and by then they had already put her on a ventilator. And
Wow.
on the third day, we'd found it. And she specifically said she did not want any artificial life support whatsoever. And the only reason she was on a ventilator to begin with is because a social worker assigned to her, it was COVID. What were they all doing for people who were in the hospital that needed that type of, treatment? They were putting them on ventilators. And the moment that we found that power of attorney, they took her off and we were really able to honor her
Honor her
wishes.
wishes. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's so important. That's so important.
Yeah. Wow. I'm sorry for your loss, but thank God you had that in place. I mean, if you didn't, then I would be like, Mom, what are you doing?
Yeah, but imagine all of the families that just don't,
Yeah.
and then I'll tell you what, I've had families fighting at the hospital because and they're coming to me after the fact, after they've lost their loved one. Now they've learned their lesson, right? Now they've been burned. Now they learned their lesson. They're like, oh, Linus, we need power of attorneys in place. This is what happened. I've had families fighting at the hospital about, well, this is not what mom wanted. Mom told me 5 years ago. No, mom told me 2 days ago, and mom's brain dead in the room, and we've got siblings fighting each other, and it never ends up well because you could just become estranged. I mean, that's happened. I've had siblings become estranged over just the medical treatments that were rendered over their parents, and you don't want that in a family. It's bad enough to lose a loved one, but at least when you've got a clear estate plan in place. And my clients, they write their wishes, they write it, they initial, it gets witnessed. So there's no fraud or forgery here. This is my client telling you, I do not, right? I do not want to be resuscitated. I want pain relief. There is no guessing. They wrote
Right.
this stuff. a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, right? And the beauty about power of attorneys is, as at least for healthcare, you can change your mind. You can change your mind. One day you may not feel like being on a ventilator. 2 years later, you may feel like, okay, well, actually, it could be life-saving for me. It's there's flexibility there, but at least you have a plan in place that allows for less family drama,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Because ultimately, you're abiding, everyone's abiding by your wishes that are clearly stated in that document. And then everyone knows everyone's on the same page, basically.
Absolutely. And even
Yeah.
if you're not on the same page, it's your parents' handwriting.
Right.
What are you gonna do? There were people that witnessed that. So what are you gonna fight about, right?
Right.
You can be angry that your mother did not want to be resuscitated, but that is what she wanted.
But it's not about you, it's
It is
about
not.
the person.
You would be surprised. There are so many divas
I'm
when it
sure.
comes to an estate plan. I'm like, okay, I have clients that are like, well, can my children, sit in? And I'm like, sure. Bring the family, let them get acquainted with me because I'm the one who's going to be answering questions further along the line. But let's make one thing clear. You're the star of the show here. I don't really need your children. I don't need their 2 cents. I just want to know, what do you want to do?
Okay, so let's say you are a homeowner and you actually have rental properties as well. What happens to rental properties and a trust and lawsuits? Because I know California is super litigious. What happens if with rental properties and lawsuits?
Okay. So I'm going to tell you what I have this question that comes up all the time, and this misconception that comes up all the time as well, where someone will say, if I put a living trust in place, right, does that mean that I'm untouchable in a lawsuit? Like no one can sue me, right? But you just said it. California is a litigious state. We've got like the most attorneys in any state ever, right? So the best way to protect yourself is to separate your personal obligations from your professional liabilities. What does that mean? If you are a homeowner, you have a single family home, and you own three rental properties, those rental properties should not be titled to you in your individual name or titled to your living trust. They should
Oh,
not.
well, they
No,
shouldn't be even in your living trust.
they should not be in your living trust.
Oh,
We're
okay.
gonna we're gonna talk about where your living trust comes in though, okay?
Okay.
Your rental properties really ought to be in their own LLCs.
Each
LLC
one, like, so if you have three separate properties, they should each be in a LLC.
in a perfect world, yes.
Okay.
And I say a perfect world because LLCs take work, right? We have
Yeah.
to worry about compliance. We have to worry about tax filings and bookkeeping for each limited liability company, right?
Hmm.
And in a perfect world, if you have three rental properties, you have three LLCs. But some people can't handle that, right? Some people can't handle the management of all of that.
That's a
And
lot.
it is. But at the minimum, you should have at least one entity in place, at least one. And I'm going to give you a scenario. What if you are sued on one of your rental properties because somebody slipped and fell right on the sidewalk of your house? And it wasn't even your tenant, it was your tenant's guest. Because let's be honest here, when my clients come to me and they're landlords, I'm not really worried about their tenants. I'm worried about who their tenants are inviting over to my client's property. Okay. So the tenant's guest sues you. And the problem with having all of your properties in your name is that your pockets are about four properties deep.
Oof.
Four properties deep. That means they can take you all the way, right? And depending on how the lawsuit plays out, you might lose one, two, three, four. You could lose all of it, right? But what if you only had one LLC and you put all three properties in that LLC and you had your family home in the living trust? That means now that when your tenant's little friend slips and falls and sues you, the only properties that are in danger are the three rental properties. Your home is not even involved. Your financial accounts, your personal financial accounts, your bank accounts, your IRA, your retirement, your life, they're not even involved. We're only talking about the things that have to do with the LLC. Now, in a perfect world, right, where you have three LLCs for the three rental properties and your tenant's little friend sues you, now they can only really reach into a pocket that's worth what? One property. So your pockets are not that deep because they're only going after one LLC versus all of your other properties, each of your, each rental property in LLC and then your home. So it matters. And I like to tell my clients, look, if you are wearing the landlord hat, do it accordingly. Do it the right way. Do it correctly. Put an LLC in place because especially if you got multi-unit properties, oh, that has to be in an LLC. If you've got 20 tenants, think about all of the people that they are inviting
Yeah.
onto your property and all of the crazy ways that they could use a stove or jump into your pool wrong, right? That's way too much liability for your personal estate to be carrying.
Do
And so
you
it's really important.
do you put your you don't put the LLCs in the trust, right? Those are
No,
separate.
right. So
Okay.
where the trust comes in is the the operating agreement for an LLC is drawn up, and that's really important because I have some clients coming to me and LegalZoom formed my LLC or the paralegal formed my LLC or I did my own LLC because I could do it by myself. Great. The problem is, the operating agreement is what really establishes that your LLC is authentic and it's real, right? And so where the living trust intersects with your LLC is that your living trust is supposed to be able to take over your company in case something happens to you, whether it's incapacity or death. And your living trust is able to inherit that LLC and its assets in case something happens to you.
Based on the operating agreements for the
Based on
LLC.
the operating, exactly. And
So
that's
if you don't so if you don't set that up correctly, then it could go into limbo and you have to go through the probate process.
yeah, it's again probate when it's not done right,
Uh,
right? And it also it becomes really crucial too because I've got a lot of clients that own like 50-unit apartment buildings, but
sure.
they're in business with another family. So now you're dealing with two business partners, two families, and you want to protect your estate. You want to make sure that your business partner is going to honor the fact that you've got, survivors, you've got beneficiaries that come into place in case something happens to you. The operating agreement becomes really crucial then too.
Good to know. I had no idea that you could. Well, it makes sense. Like, but that's why you're an
Yes.
attorney, and that's why I'm a real estate agent.
Oh, you're crucial. You are so important because you connect people with their biggest assets.
Yeah.
You do. And I don't know if I've told you this, but I actually met a realtor that told me that she didn't, up until she had met me, she did not believe in living trusts.
Oh,
And
really?
she was encouraging her clients to put her kids on title with her clients. And my heart just stopped like, how could you do that as a
Well, I mean,
professional of your caliber?
that's why I always tell people, look, I'm not an attorney, but I have a team of attorneys I work with, whether it's bankruptcy, family law, probate, estate planning. Like, it is so critical to have a really good team in place that will look out for your interests and protect your assets and protect your wishes in anything. So that's why I have a good team. And thank you for being part of my team. I'm so grateful.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it starts with professionals like us, just basically disseminating the information. And look, statistically, you're supposed to hear something 7 times before it actually, does something for you. And I don't care if I have to tell somebody 7 times. If you own a home, you need a living trust. If you own a home, you need a living trust. But you and I together could touch so many more people together, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And this is my mission now this year is like, everyone that I've helped over the last few years purchase properties, I'm like, okay, let's get this into a trust because it will just protect you, your family. The last thing you want is to have to go through that process where, and I'm not only the financial cost, but the emotional cost of going through probate. It's got to be staggering when you're already grieving your loved one and you have to deal with all of the emotional aspects of a death, then having to deal with the court and then the fees. I mean, there's just so many things that you can avoid. Now, that's the reason why I think that this is so critical to talk about.
No, I agree. I agree. And there's such a drastic difference between estate planning clients and probate clients, right?
Yeah.
My estate planning clients, some of them come to me and they're very anxious, they're already knowing they should have done this 10 years ago. But I can tell you that once the plan is in place, there's a lot of peace of mind. There's a lot of happiness there. We go through a really relaxed process of trying to really solidify my client's intentions versus my probate client who's already knows, right? Oh, I'm about to lose a lot of money. I'm about to gamble with a lot of time that I don't even know when this is going to end. And I'm about to be at the whim of a court that's going to set dates for me. And I want the dates now, but they're going to be 6 months, 9 months, 12 months out. It's so different. It's a different. My estate planning clients, so happy.
Sure.
Probate clients, not so much.
Yeah.
It's drastic.
For sure. Okay, so anytime that I am listing a home, sometimes I'll see a revocable trust and sometimes I'll see an irrevocable trust. Can you explain the difference between the two?
Absolutely. So it's pretty straightforward, but it's interesting because a lot of people come at me from the jump asking for an irrevocable trust, and it makes me giggle because a lot of people, most of the general population do not need an irrevocable trust. So an irrevocable trust is exactly that. It's irrevocable. You put the baby in place and you cannot change it unless you go to the court to apply to make a change. And the whole point of estate planning, at least for me, is to be able to do things without court involvement, right?
To
I
have
hate probate. Yeah, I
yeah,
hate
to have
probate.
flexibility.
I hate conservatorships. Let's do this right. And so we don't ever have to see a judge, right? Irrevocable trust, again, you cannot change them without the permission of the court.
Mm.
A revocable trust
Means
is
you can
one
change
that
it.
you can change. You can
Yeah.
change. I have clients who change their mind once a year. I support them. Whatever your intentions are, that's how your living trust should be, right? But revocable trust, you can amend it whenever you want. You can revoke it whenever you want. That's the beauty of a revocable trust. Now, this is not to say that irrevocable trusts have no place in our lives. This is not true, right? This is not true. They come in handy when we're talking about beneficiaries who are maybe disabled or who have special needs. Maybe they're on the spectrum, right? Or we can also be talking about a taxable estate, right? So right now, I think for a single individual, it's like somewhere over 13 million. If you're hitting close to $13 million in your estate and double that, 26 million and above, if you're married, then you might want to be thinking about an irrevocable trust to go with your revocable trust. But if you're the average person, which, my clients tend to be, maybe they own one property or three properties because they're landlords, then really what we're talking about is a revocable trust because my goal for my clients is to always be as flexible in their plans as possible to be able to make the type of changes that they want to implement whenever they want without court involvement, without having to apply to a judge for permission. But that's the difference.
That makes a lot of sense. And then I'm sure most people would want to have the option to change the trust whenever they want.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, irrevocable trusts, they do have a place in our lives, but it's for very, very specific circumstances.
Well, if somebody has $26 million and if they need to buy or sell a house, I'm totally available to help them.
I got you. I got your number.
All right. So I guess the last question I have is a lot of people think that doing estate planning is going to be exorbitantly expensive. Can you talk a little bit about what people should expect or a range of what it costs to do a proper estate planning?
Um, I have a lot of prospects that like to shop around, which that's great, right? I don't blame you for that. You've got to find an estate planning attorney that you want to work with, that vibes with you, that is in line with your intentions and, the things that you want to accomplish with regard to your estate and your legacy, right? What bothers me, and I've seen these signs in these neighborhoods where they'll sell you a 599 trust, a trust for $599, right? And that's supposed to protect your estate from conservatorship, from probate. Here is the problem. Your home is in LA County an average of $900,000,
Yep.
right? Do you really think $599 is a sufficient enough price tag to adequately protect your biggest asset? You've got to be crazy if you're saying yes, right? Because no, it's not. That's not what it's going to do. I have retained so many of these clients who decided to spend several $100s 3 years ago versus getting the right professional, right, to work on their plan. And I found so many gaps in the plan. I found that my client had a living trust in place, but guess what? The house is not in trust. So a quit claim deed
That's
was
the
never,
whole point, right?
I'm telling you, I can tell you so many stories. So the biggest asset that you own in your life is actually not protected with the living trust. And here you are walking around life for the last 3, 4, 5 years thinking you're good, right? Your wife's good, your kids are good, they're taken care of. Um, so, my number one advice for prospects as far as shopping around for an estate planning attorney or shopping around for the right living trust or estate plan is one, go to an estate planning attorney, right? Go to an estate planning attorney because you're not paying for paper documents. You could do that on your own. I've had people go to Office Depot and draft up their own living trust, and then they end up coming to me because they know that they did an inadequate job. You're not paying for paper documents. One, you're paying for legal advice, right? And there's a lot that goes on in estate planning. It's more than just who gets what when you die. There's a lot of things to think about, right? We're thinking about property taxes. We're thinking about power of
Our
attorneys and voting.
attorney, health
Exactly.
directives.
Oh God, all of it. There's a lot that goes into that. And so, you want to be talking to the right professional. You want to make sure that your deed reflects that your trust owns your home, right? And you want to make sure that you're going to the right place the first time, you
Yeah.
know?
I mean,
Um,
you get what you pay for. Like if you're
oh
gonna
my
get a
God.
discount mattress, you're gonna sleep crappy. If you go to a discount dentist, you're probably gonna have bad teeth.
Yes, yes. And so, you just want to talk to the right professional. That's step one. And step two is, okay, maybe you're not the type that needs to be working with a big firm, right? I mean, I left a big firm and they were starting at $6,500 for an estate plan. But I can tell you, this firm was looking for a certain type of client. We were looking for landlords. We were looking for entrepreneurs who had several businesses in place. So, you know, and that's not necessarily the average person in my community, right? The average person in my community maybe owns two homes, and one is a rental, but they really only have one job, right? So it just depends, but you want to make sure that step one, you're talking to the right professional. You're not talking to a life insurance agent because your life insurance agent is not going to ask you if your child has special needs, right? A life insurance agent isn't not going to take into fact that, yeah, maybe you do have a 9 year old, and how are we going to leave a 9 year old $5 million, right? We're not thinking about that as a life insurance agent. So again, talk to the right professional. If you're thinking about paying $599 for a living trust, you are way off base. way off base. Let's just think about how much you pay in property taxes every year. What do you think that $599 is going to do for you? It's not going to give you peace of mind. It is not. So
Cool.
yeah, it just depends. It depends. As far as like the price range, again, you may not want to be dealing with a larger firm. You may want to be dealing with a larger firm because you already deal with them. It just depends. But number one, just talk to the right professional to begin with.
Perfect. Well, Linus, I really, really appreciate all of the information that you just gave us. It was so much really good nuggets in there. If someone wants to hire you for estate planning, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
The beauty about, what I do is that I actually do love meeting people, right? I love learning about them and what it is that they want to protect. And so I actually give free Zoom and telephone consultations. You just have to sign up, right? You can get to me via email, attorney at lionesslaw.me, or via my phone, 619-245-5688. You can see I'm a pretty friendly person.
Yeah.
I'm not scary unless you get on my wrong side. No, I'm just kidding.
I don't want to find that out.
But I do love what I do. And, if anything, if I could just get a chance to educate somebody about why estate planning is important to them and their circumstances, I'm all for it.
Perfect. Well, thank you again so much for all this information. It's so great. And I will be reaching out to you very soon because I have to update my will
I got you. We're
as
good.
well.
Yes,
So thank you again. And if you guys have any questions about estate planning, comment down below. We will answer that. And then you can email and give Linus a call.
thank you so much, Philippe. This was really awesome.
Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, you too.